Revenge with Karen.
I'm not approving that invoice until we get the right bond writer, I said, holding the file like it was radioactive. Bryce smirked. No one reads that legal junk anyway. It was 7:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I already wanted to shove my entire 3-monitor setup into the breakroom Keurig. Bryce had been here 3 weeks and was already making it his full-time job to bulldoze everything that wasn't flashy enough to look good on a slide deck. Man wore Bluetooth earbuds like they were a personality. He'd never met a form he didn't want to ignore or a shortcut he didn't want to take. Me, I was the boring one. Contracts administrator. 9 years at Ferris and Wexler. Never missed a deadline, never lost a document, never let a single compliance clause get bulldozed without a fight. My job was to make sure the house didn't collapse. His job? Toss lit matches into the walls and call it a renovation. Leaned against my cubicle like it owed him rent. Ashley, we're moving faster now. We don't need every T crossed. This isn't court. No, I said, dry as printer toner, but it is the federal government. Bryce waved me off. We've got AI procurement tools now. The system flags anything important. I stared at him. The system doesn't read bond clause riders, Bryce. Humans do that. Exactly, he said with a wink, and you've just been replaced by a faster one. I wish I could say I screamed, flipped a desk, or threw a stapler at his forehead. But no, I just sat there and let him think he'd won. I nodded like a good little admin drone and opened my version history folder. Because here's the thing about being boring and invisible. You can change the map while they're not looking. That's how Clause 11, B, was born. Right around the time Bryce started crowing about process streamlining and mocking my spreadsheets during lunch breaks, I updated the firm's standard change order template. Quietly. No fanfare. Just a little buried clause that said all federal contract modifications required a secondary sign-off from a designated compliance officer to remain within surety bond terms. Without it, we'd be in technical breach. Guess who the designated compliance officer was? Spoiler, it wasn't Bryce. And when I say no one noticed, I mean no one. Not legal, not the interns, not even the guy from QA who reads onboarding PDFs for fun. They were all too busy clapping for Bryce's new era of efficiency to bother reading the fine print. Oh, and by the way, if you're enjoying this story and want to make sure I keep exposing corporate idiots with weaponized paperwork, hit that subscribe button and toss a like on this. Seriously, 93% of people who listen don't subscribe, and it's the only thing keeping my tea hot and my lawyer friends paid. Appreciate ya. Back at Ferris and Wexler, the storm was still a speck on the horizon. Bryce was revving up. He'd started pushing through federal highway bids with zero oversight, signing off on procurement routes that skipped our usual vendors in favor of some cut-rate supplier he used to golf with in Scottsdale. I flagged the risks, flagged the timelines, flagged the potential for exactly what was about to happen. He called me paranoid and CC'd the COO with a "we're modernizing" subject line. I watched as compliance emails piled up in his inbox, unread. I documented. I double-backed everything to my personal cloud, encrypted and timestamped. I saved every signature, every version, every snide Slack comment. Because if there's one thing I've learned after 9 years in federal contracting, it's this: the system always ticks, quietly, until it doesn't. 1 week before everything unraveled, Bryce called me into a meeting just to publicly say my job was redundant and that the future of procurement didn't include manual bottlenecks. I nodded, I smiled. I handed him a stack of pre-cleared change orders. They all had Clause 11, B, in them. He didn't read a single one. Then I went back to my desk, closed my laptop, quietly started backing up my consulting portfolio. Not because I was scared of losing my job, but because I knew exactly how they were going to lose their bond. Bryce called it a new dawn. That's what he actually named the internal memo, like he was announcing the second coming of capitalism. Big serif font, corporate blue header, lots of vague verbs. Streamline, modernize, optimize. Whole thing read like it had been written by ChatGPT after too many white wine spritzers. But the kicker, page 2, effective immediately, Non-core compliance workflows will be redirected through our AI-enabled procurement assistant and temp support pool. Translation: he fired half the back office team and gave the rest of us chat bots and interns. 2 people were let go before lunch. The first was a 30-year vet who used to run a 300-line procurement matrix from memory. The second was the only staffer who could translate GSA clause references without blinking. I saw her packing her world's most pedantic mug into a cardboard box while Bryce shook hands and told her she'd been out-evolved. He wanted velocity, not accuracy. Optics, not integrity. Real earthquake hit 3 days later. A $9.8 million federal highway job. Our biggest contract of the quarter. Every vendor had to be bonded, documented, and clean as a priest's browser history. I flagged the supplier Bryce selected, some rickety company out of Nevada that hadn't touched a government project in 10 years. They'd failed 3 prior performance reviews. Their COO once got sued for welding rebar with a Zippo lighter. No joke. Brought Bryce the file. He skimmed the cover page, then tossed it aside. Ashley, you worry too much. They're fast, they're cheap, and they've already greased the wheels. I blinked. Greased, he winked. Pre-cleared, Ashley. Don't be such a dinosaur. I stood there for a solid 5 seconds. They failed a compliance inspection last year for falsifying their insurance documentation. He waved a dismissive hand like I was shooing a fly from his cocktail. We're past that now. They've upgraded. Plus, the AI flagged them green. Because someone updated their PDF, I said, that's not due diligence, it's clip art. I've already signed off, he said. It's happening. I didn't argue. What was the point? Bryce wasn't listening, he never had been, so I went back to my desk, pulled up the master template for our change order documents, and did the only thing that still made sense. I buried a landmine. Clause 11, B. I phrased it like legal oatmeal, bland, dense, and just vague enough to get ignored. Any federally sourced procurement modification in excess of $250,000 requires dual signatory validation by 1, the project manager, and 2, the assigned compliance officer of record as registered with the surety bond issuer. Simple, direct, lethal. No one read it. I mean, they should have. But Bryce was in a hurry. Legal was swamped. Everyone else was too busy trying not to be next on the chopping block. I uploaded the new template, applied it to all future change orders, and rolled it out silently through our document control system. No fanfare, no email blast, just a quiet update logged with a timestamp and a backup stored under an innocuous folder titled FY 2023 Template HV4 Final FINA L4 Real PDF. Then I waited, because here's the thing, I didn't need revenge. I didn't want drama. I just wanted safety nets, and Clause 11. B was the tightrope I'd built beneath the company while the acrobats above me juggled flaming chainsaws blindfolded. By the end of the week, 5 contracts had been modified with my version. Bryce signed all of them. Not a single one included the required compliance sign-off. Because, again, no one reads the fine print, not when they're sprinting toward quarterly bonuses and hoping no one checks the brake fluid. I backed everything up, each signed change order, each routing slip, each internal approval email. Time-stamped, version-locked, verified. The best part? Bryce himself emailed me a thank you for getting with the program. Said it was nice to see me finally adapting to the new way. I framed that email. Because the thing about golden boys like Bryce is, they shine real bright, right up until the system reminds them that gold melts. The shipment didn't arrive. It was a custom-poured concrete batch scheduled for an airstrip expansion at Elmwood Federal Reserve. High security, no delays tolerated. The delivery window was 4 hours. The supplier Bryce forced through, they missed it by 36. And like a possum cornered in a Waffle House kitchen, Bryce panicked ugly. I got the first call from site manager Cortez at 5:12 a.m. Ashley, the hell's my pour? The truck's not even in state. I checked the vendor log. The last update was 2 days old. I escalated it up the chain like I was supposed to. Vendor contact, unreachable. DOT routing, incomplete. Compliance status, a flaming question mark in a trench coat. Bryce didn't respond until 11:38 a.m. when he strolled into the glass conference room with a venti cold brew and the moral compass of a used car commercial. Scheduled a mandatory team meeting titled Postmortem and Accountability. That's how I knew someone was getting thrown under a moving contractor van. Thanks, everyone, for joining on short notice, he began, all confidence and cologne. We hit a snag on Elmwood, and we need to be real about why. I sat still, hands folded, face blank. Bryce tapped a remote, and the projector displayed a procurement routing form with my name on it. This, he said, is what happens when we cling to legacy processes. Ashley's insistence on slowing us down with redundant compliance reviews gave us zero buffer. I opened my mouth just slightly. Don't interrupt, he said with a performative laugh. It's not personal. I looked at the screen. My initials were there, sure. On a vendor flagged 3 times by me, each note clearly stating the risk. Each comment ignored. Bryce clicked to the next slide. So, moving forward, cutting the bottlenecks. We're making bold moves, and then he looked at me. Ashley, thank you for your time here, he said like he was reading it off a Hallmark card. But your role no longer aligns with the company's direction. That was it. No HR, no one else from management. Just Bryce, a PowerPoint deck, and a dozen coworkers pretending their chairs were made of fire. I stood, tucked in my chair, straightened my blazer. Understood, I said. No quiver, no sarcasm, just airtight poise. He extended a hand. I ignored it, then I walked out. But before I hit the elevator, I made one final stop, my desk. 5 clicks, one encrypted export of the audit trail, every change order, every signature, every version of the modified template with Clause 11, be sitting like a loaded trap in the legalese. That same afternoon, while Bryce was still doing his victory lap, I watched the system log update with 6 fresh change orders approved under his name. Backlogged approvals, all rushed through now that I was out of the way, all missing the required dual sign-off, all federal jobs, all bound by the bond conditions, and every single one of them tied directly to a clause he never read. I poured myself a drink that night, not because I was sad, but because I knew what came next. Not instantly, not like in the movies, explosive confrontation. Just a slow, ticking cascade, a whisper at first, because Bryce didn't just fire the paper pusher. He cut the fuse on a bomb buried in his own workflow and smiled while he did it. Humiliation, sure, but it didn't last. What lasted was the audit trail. The paper I pushed, it pushed back. The first alert came in at 2:14 a.m. Subject line, noncompliant change order sequence detected. Status, violation of Clause 11. Triggered by, user, Bryce Langston, VP Ops. I didn't even flinch. Just sipped my tea and scrolled. 3 more alerts rolled in over the next hour, each tied to a separate federal contract. Each missing the second signature, mine. Each one carrying the quiet weight of a ticking clock. C, when I built Clause 11. B, into the change order template. I didn't just add text, activated an automated verification process that logged incomplete approvals and triggered passive alerts to our compliance shadow system. Most people didn't even know it existed. We called it the kitchen sink. It was a last resort audit protocol I helped design after a close call with an Army Corps project in 2019. And once activated, it didn't bark. It purred, silently building a case, logging violations, timestamping every signature like it was preparing for court. Meanwhile, Bryce was too busy measuring his own ego to notice the low hum of his career catching fire. By mid-morning, he was on a call with the COO, bragging about how he'd cleaned up the dead weight and fast-tracked procurement for 3 major bids. I know this because Diane in payroll accidentally CC'd me on the call summary. Old habits die hard when your name used to be on every compliance loop. I enabled procurement's the future, he said. Ashley, she was holding us back. I chuckled out loud. Then I opened a new spreadsheet labeled Clients Q3 Interest. Because if there's one thing I learned faster than Bryce learned to butcher process workflows, it's that people pay attention when you leave, especially when things start to break. Within 48 hours of my exit, my LinkedIn inbox went from tumbleweeds to triage. 4 former colleagues reached out two offering gigs, one asking if I'd consult, and one just saying, "Holy hell, you were right." By the weekend, I had 5 separate agencies asking if I could review their federal bid compliance chains real quick. I politely declined 4 of them. The 5th one was paying triple my old rate, and they started every call with, "We read everything, especially the footnotes." It felt good, not petty, not vengeful, just earned. And as for Bryce, was busy ramming through more change orders like a kid speedrunning his homework. No peer review, no compliance cross-check, just a signature, a forward, and a smug little victory lap around Slack. His status messages went from "let's go" to "big W today to your move," Fed's smiling face with sunglasses. I watched in real time as his signature piled onto forms that all had the same gaping hole, "no compliance officer sign-off." And each time he did it, another quiet flag hit the system. The beauty of Clause 11, B, wasn't that it screamed when violated, it was that it waited. It let the violations accumulate. It recorded every failure, every omission, every missing check. And when the moment came, when the surety bond carrier or federal compliance team ran a standard audit, it wouldn't take much. Just one search, just one clause, and one missing name, mine. So I didn't chase revenge. I didn't send angry emails or call whistleblower hotlines. I didn't need to. I just kept sipping my tea, logging my own hours, forwarding my resume to firms that respected the fine print, watching the system tick forward like a well-wound watch. And Bryce, he was dancing on the trapdoor, thinking he'd won. But the thing about trapdoors is, they're quiet. Until they're not. It started with a single email, buried in a subfolder no one checked unless something was already on fire. From audit inquiry at Integritas Reta Group Com subject, verification request, Ferris and Wexler project change order compliance, review 5 sentences. Clinical, punctuated with words like preliminary suspension and procedural discrepancy. But buried right there in paragraph 3, like a little gift-wrapped time bomb, Clause 11. Be referenced but unverified. Please confirm existence and timestamped review of second signatory, as outlined in Federal Compliance Protocol. I read it 3 times, then once more just to enjoy it. By then, I wasn't even working from my kitchen anymore. I was upstate in a little rental cabin, just me, my laptop, and a thermos of good coffee that didn't taste like office politics. It was raining outside. The kind of slow, heavy rain that makes everything feel quieter, except my inbox. That thing was a damn nightclub. I'd already taken on 2 consulting contracts. Both paid better than my old salary. One client insisted on Zoom calls with my cat visible for morale. The other just called me Clause Girl and wired half the retainer up front. I didn't advertise. Word just spread. Because in the world of government contracting, when someone who never screws up suddenly gets fired, people ask questions. Back at Ferris and Wexler, Bryce had apparently built his empire on the assumption that no one would. That audit email, it didn't land quietly. I heard about the fallout from a friend in legal who still owed me a whiskey. She messaged me one word, boom. The firm's CFO called an emergency meeting. The GC called in sick. Procurement started scrubbing timestamps like it was a crime scene. But it was too late. Clause 11. B wasn't just a suggestion, it was a recorded policy, baked into every single contract signed under my name. And now those contracts, dozens of them, were being scrutinized by the one entity that made Bryce's swagger irrelevant, the surety bond provider. See, federal infrastructure work is like flying commercial over volcanoes. You don't get to make mistakes and keep your wings. If your surety bond gets suspended, you're grounded. Permanently. The official notice hit 2 days after the first email from Integrity Surety Group subject. Suspension of coverage, immediate review required body. Due to unresolved procedural discrepancies in high-value contracts submitted under active federal bids, Integrity Surety Group has temporarily suspended bond coverage for Ferris and Wexler pending full compliance audit. No new federal bid submissions will be processed until this matter is resolved. Translation: Ferris and Wexler just got thrown out of the casino mid-hand. And every federal client who thought they were playing with a full deck suddenly realized they'd been handed monopoly money. I got a call, blocked number, no message. Then an email, "Hey, Ashley, hope you're well. Can we touch base?" Tomas from Ops touch base. I poured more coffee. That same afternoon, the Department of Transportation issued a hold notice on 2 pending bids, both involving the supplier Bryce insisted on using. Apparently, that vendor had submitted outdated licensing info on at least 3 projects, one of which was flagged in a whistleblower report the moment it went public. A slow, inevitable collapse. No explosions, just the sound of boots hitting polished floors as execs started doing the math on how many contracts would be yanked if that bond stayed suspended. And me, just refresh the news feeds and read the emails. Watch the ripples. One legal firm I used to work adjacent to even published a white paper about the importance of layered compliance safeguards, with Clause 11. Be quoted in a sidebar. My name wasn't in it, but I didn't need credit. I had satisfaction, laced with the kind of vindication that comes from knowing you were the last sane person on the boat, and you told them about the iceberg. They didn't listen. Now they were swimming. The bid rejection hit like a brick through stained glass. The project was a $32 million runway reinforcement initiative at a mid-tier military airbase, routine work if your ducks were in a row. Ferris and Wexler had submitted the bid under Bryce's streamlined process, bypassing the normal compliance review window entirely. He'd called it a just-in-time paperwork model, like he was reinventing the wheel with fewer bolts. Came the bounce back. From Fed bid gov do not reply subject. Submission rejected, incomplete authorization protocol detected. It landed at 8:41 a.m. on a Monday. By 9:10, legal had started a forensic trace. Clause 11. B had triggered again, this time through the federal submission API itself, which had been updated to cross-check signatory chains on federally bonded jobs. All Bryce's fast-tracked signatures. Our sequence, missing the compliance officer. My name, again. Inside the office, it went from confusion to chaos in under 3 hours. Legal's inbox lit up, procurement panicked. Marketing, who had already sent out celebratory press blurbs with BID secured in bold, tried to recall them. Too late. One went out to a federal liaison who immediately flagged the discrepancy up the food chain. And Bryce? Well, our boy had a plan. Deny, deflect, reframe. Called a 2 p.m. leadership sync where he blamed template corruption, suggested that maybe old compliance logic had lingered in the document system, and even implied that my termination had left a legacy paper trail that mudded the waters. Why were these signed without compliance review? Someone asked. A VP. I wasn't there, obviously, but a little bird from HR forwarded me the team's transcript. Silence, and a reply from one of the legal analysts, because Ashley was fired and no one assigned a new compliance officer. Another message, this one from procurement. We didn't know Clause 11. Be required that on the new template. It wasn't flagged. Legal, again. It's on every change order signed in the last 2 months. Boom. The unraveling began in earnest. Meetings piled up. Consultants were looped in. A neutral third-party auditor was suggested. IT tried to blame a document merge glitch. Someone floated the idea of calling me, quietly of course, to clarify intent around the clause. Meanwhile, I was elbow-deep in a compliance simulation workshop for a private engineering firm that had just won a federal energy contract and wanted to get ahead of red tape. They paid me $300 an hour to walk them through what happens when your sign-off protocols implode. Used anonymized versions of my old company's documents as examples. Every so often, I'd check my inbox, not out of desperation, out of habit. The way you glance at a pot you know is about to boil, watching the bubbles creep up the sides. Back at Ferris and Wexler, more internal chatter leaked my way. Slack screenshots, texts. One from a former colleague read, Bryce is pacing like a meth-addicted pelican. Eagle has a printed binder with his initials on 14 violations. Another, CEO canceled his golf trip. They're having a core staff realignment meeting Thursday. Guess who's not invited? A third. Your clause is now referred to as the guillotine. I laughed, but not loudly, because this wasn't joy. This wasn't revenge. This was inevitability playing out in slow motion, like a freight train rolling down a hill everyone swore was flat. And I said nothing. No press release, no social post, no subtweet with a popcorn gif, just silence. Professional, unbothered, impenetrable silence. Because when your work is solid, you don't have to shout. You just have to wait for the echo. The subject line was short. Just, can we talk? The sender, Gerald Stanton, CEO of Ferris and Wexler. A man who once told me I had a great head for details and then promoted Bryce over me because clients like flash. His email hit my personal inbox at 6:03 a.m. Not a calendar invite. Not a forwarded assistant request. Just 4 words and a digital olive branch dipped in desperation. I read it while watering a basil plant. Didn't even open it right away. Let it sit there for an hour, blinking unread, while I stirred honey into my tea and finished reviewing a subcontractor packet for a client who actually listened when I said this clause matters. Funny how the companies that pay on time also ask questions before signing things. Around 7:15, I forwarded the email to my attorney. Subject, they're cracking. Attachment, Clause 11 Template V3. PDF for reference by noon. Gerald had a response. Not from me, he wouldn't get that privilege. It came from the law office of Kaplan, Rigg, and Harlow. My counsel, one of those lawyers who speaks softly but invoices like a wrecking ball. Reply was civil. Warm, even. But it included a 5-page attachment. Proposal. Contractual consulting agreement Ashley D. Monroe hourly rate, $475, retainer, $15,000, term, month-to-month scope, bond compliance audit and change order review conditions, remote only, no NDA, 0 direct interaction with Bryce Langston. All communications via secure portal or legal intermediary. A wiggle room, no meetings, no quick calls to align. If they wanted the person who built the framework they were now drowning in, they could pay the toll. I expected pushback, maybe a counteroffer, a negotiation. What I got was an instant DocuSign signature and a follow-up email from Gerald that read only, "Thank you. We're ready when you are. Damn right you are." The audit files landed on my desk less than an hour later. A mountain of chaos, change orders, internal comms, draft PDFs full of red lines and missing initials. I logged into their backend system, still using the admin password I'd set up 9 months prior, FWX compliance #2023, and began cross-referencing timestamps. Every violation was a breadcrumb. Every missing signature was a spotlight on Bryce's incompetence. I didn't rush. I annotated. I highlighted. I flagged patterns. And every so often, I paused to admire just how elegantly the trap had sprung. They didn't even realize Clause 11. B wasn't just a clause, it was a ledger. A living record of everything they refused to do until it was too late. Back-channel chatter resumed. One from Tomas in Ops. Saw your name in the system again. You're back. No reply. Another from Cheryl in Legal. Gerald looked relieved after your contract cleared. Bryce hasn't been seen on Zoom all week. Still no reply. 'Cause I wasn't back. I was billing. I was the invoice that arrived after the ego faded and the panic set in. I was no longer on the team. I was the professional they'd discarded, now holding the only map out of their mess. And every minute they wasted pretending otherwise cost them $7.91, because I made sure my hourly rate calculated down to the penny. Just for fun. Bryce, still radio silent. No forwarded emails. No apologies. No attempts at contact. Good. The contract was ironclad. I wouldn't work a single minute if his name even appeared in a CC line. And yet, I could feel him squirming somewhere behind the glass walls of that office, watching the system he'd hijacked slowly, precisely, get rebuilt around the woman he called obsolete. Obsolete. That word was going to look real good next to his severance paperwork. The boardroom was packed tighter than a fire code would allow, and dead silent, for the faint buzz of the overhead fluorescents and the hum of the projector warming up. Gerald sat at the head of the table, flanked by legal, finance, ops, and whatever ghost remained of procurement's credibility. No catered lunch, no coffee carafes, just binders, laptops, and the scent of an empire on fire. Bryce was there too, pale, jittery, shirt collar open, tie missing. He looked like a man trying to sweat out a felony. "Let's begin," said Natalie from legal, voice flat as drywall. She tapped the remote. Slide 1 came up, change order chain Elmwood project. This is the first of 17 flagged submissions currently under review by Integrity Surety Group and the Department of Transportation. You'll see that all 17 follow an identical authorization pattern. Click. Slide 2, Bryce's signature, bold and smug in blue ink. Date stamped. No co-signature. No compliance officer listed. Each was signed unilaterally by Vice President Langston. She continued, not even glancing his way. No secondary sign-off. No compliance verification. Despite every contract bearing the latest version of the change order template, she tapped again. Slide 3, a zoomed-in box of text. Clause 11, B, highlighted in canary yellow. All federally sourced procurement modifications in excess of $250,000 require dual signatory validation by 1, the project manager, and 2, the assigned compliance officer of record as registered with the surety bond issuer. Natalie let the silence breathe. Gerald squinted at the screen like it had personally insulted his stock portfolio. Was this clause new? Added 6 months ago, she said. It went through document control, version locked, logged, distributed, and who was the compliance officer of record? The CFO asked. Until her termination, Natalie replied, Ashley Monroe. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Gerald closed his eyes, so every change order since she was fired is in violation. Natalie confirmed, unbonded, non-compliant, ineligible for federal acceptance, technically fraudulent. Another click. A chart now, project names, bid amounts, status, rejected, suspended under review. Due to these violations, she continued, Ferris and Wexler has been placed on a federal procurement freeze. Our surety coverage remains suspended. We've lost 5 active bids and 2 standing contracts. More will follow. Bryce cleared his throat. His voice cracked as he spoke. Okay, but, nobody actually reads all that legal stuff. Natalie cut him off with the kind of look usually reserved for war crimes and open-mouth chewing. Ashley did. 3 words. No heat, no smugness, just a scalpel. Bryce looked like he'd been hit with a brick wrapped in a resume. He fumbled for something else to say, but Gerald had already turned to the GC. Is there a path back? He asked, but it sounded more like begging than strategy. There is, the GC said slowly. It involves full procedural remediation, written statement to integrity, federal oversight for the next 4 quarters, and he glanced at Natalie, Ashley's complete cooperation. Gerald exhaled like a man trying not to vomit in front of investors. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water bottle. Bryce opened his mouth again, and for the first time, Gerald didn't look at him, just held up a hand. No, he said, just, no. That's when it landed. The full weight of it. Not just that the contracts were botched. Not just that the company was bleeding federal dollars. But that every signature Bryce had scrawled in his power trip was now a nail in the company's coffin. He hadn't built a system. He'd lit a match in a fireworks factory, and now everyone in that room knew it. Clause 11. B wasn't a footnote. It was the fuse. The signature came through at 9:42 a.m. sharp, digitally verified, time-stamped, signed by Gerald Stanton himself. A CEO's admission, sealed with corporate ink, that they couldn't fix what they'd broken without the woman they threw out like last year's budget binder. Ashley Monroe, compliance officer emerita, now billing at full rate, unlimited hours, retroactive pay included. I didn't gloat, didn't dance. Just opened the secure portal, logged into their system, and began the slow, meticulous excavation of every compliance artifact Bryce had trampled over like a toddler with finger paint. 72 change orders, 33 without a second signatory, 14 with timestamps edited post-submission, 6 tagged with internal override flags written by someone clearly trying to patch a leak with duct tape and hope. I restored what I could, reconstructed the chain of custody on contracts, that hadn't yet been blacklisted, uploaded compliance addendums with notarized statements and audit-ready cross-references. For the others, the ones that were already lost to federal breach notices, I logged the damage, filed the loss reports, and moved on. No anger, no heat, just the cold satisfaction of a surgeon in her element. Every so often, a message would pop into the portal. Let us know if you need additional access. Thank you again for helping us navigate this. Bryce has been reassigned. Reassigned, huh? That was cute. Because what actually happened quietly, without an announcement, without so much as a goodbye bagel, was that Bryce Langston disappeared. His name was removed from Slack within minutes. His email shut off. His desk emptied, as if he'd never existed. He didn't even get the dignity of a farewell thread. Just gone. His last recorded act as VP of Operations was signing a change order on a suspended bid, 2 hours after Clause 11. He had officially triggered a federal response. Poetic, really, like watching someone drown while holding the manual for how to swim. I was paid in full by the end of the week. No questions, no quibbling over scope or hours. Gerald didn't even blink when my invoice arrived with a line item labeled post-termination procedural reconstruction due to gross negligence. On Friday afternoon, as the fall leaves outside my cabin started to turn the same color as old manila folders, a final email hit my inbox. From Gerald Stanton, subject, no subject body, thank you, we're sorry. I stared at it for a moment. No legalese, no ask, just those 4 hollow words from a man who finally understood what he'd lost. I clicked reply, typed 2 words, no greeting, no sign-off, just Clause 11. Then I closed the laptop, walked outside, breathed in the kind of crisp air you only get when you've burned every bridge worth crossing, and watched the fire light your way forward. I didn't sabotage a thing. I wrote the rules, and I followed them. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.